Welcome to the Copper State Marching Podcast, sponsored by the Arizona Marching Band Association, AZMBA. My name is Martin Hebda, the AZMBA Director of Education and Outreach.
My name is Dan Hoffman, and I'm just a friend of the pod. AZMBA Copper State Podcast was created to bring together the Arizona marching band community and to connect, educate, and entertain those involved in this wonderful activity.
Dan, you're much more than a friend of the pod. You're a friend to all, I must say. We've known each other for some time now, and I'm glad to be doing this podcast with you. For all of our listeners, I would listen back to episode 3.4, where we did an extensive interview with Dan on the podcast. I've known you since 2018 when you came to Arizona, and for anyone who may not have heard that previous podcast, can you give us a quick recap of how you came here?
Sure. So I'm actually born and raised in upstate New York. Believe it or not, a pretty strong marching band scene there. And that's where I fell in love with the activity. That led me to March Drum Corps with the Boston Crusaders. And then people that I met there got me connected with the Oregon Crusaders Drum and Bugle Corps, where I was served on their visual staff alongside some other Arizona greats. And so that's when my Arizona connection began, was 2016. And then after 3 summers of teaching with these people and falling in love with them, 2018, I made the move across the country. So I've been here ever since.
I enjoyed the time that we had working together at Casa Grande. I feel like from day one, you just had a great rapport with all of our students. You came in and there was that immediate connection, which I think happens probably with you and a lot of people in the arts. So that's something that's pretty special. I know you're spending a lot of time judging, both indoors and outdoors. How much are you enjoying that? That's kind of a new thing for you over the last several years.
Dude, it's so cool. It's actually, oh God, this feels like this needs to be its own episode, but because I never imagined myself becoming a judge. It's just sort of, I had to adjust my relationship to band. I couldn't do it as in person as much as I was before. And that free time and that lack of direct, involvement with any programs made me a great candidate to start judging locally. And that's blossomed in the last 5 years. And actually, just this past weekend, as we're recording this, I had my first ever out of state judging gig, and that was just so cool. So, yeah.
Well, that's great. That's great. I know I always love hearing your tapes, whether you're up in the box or down on the field, and you're even better in the critique. You do a great job of recognizing what students are achieving, yet where there can still be room for growth. So I think you definitely found your area of excellence. Today we're going to be bringing on Ryan Springler. Our goal is to have a two-part podcast discussing the coordinator's role in show design.
Yes. So for part one, we're going to get kind of maybe philosophical and talk more creative, more abstractly, digging into the mindset of someone who is creative and artistic, and sort of how do outside influences and how do other experiences ultimately mediate and maybe dictate the path of at least one program coordinator's life. And then in our second podcast, this is part two, we're going to get actually into the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty. So we hope that the first podcast gives you some great inspiration and some unique ways of thinking. So it's not just about checking off boxes, but how we have fun. And then the second part is how do we check off those boxes and maybe do it in a streamlined way.
All right. So before we get started, let's do a shout out to all of our sponsors.
AZMBA would like to thank our sponsors: Arizona Cardinals Football Club, The Band Shop, Bravgo Media, Encore Gifts, Forte Athletics, Instrumental Music Center, MacPack, Milano's Music, Music Celebrations International, Music for All, Pieces of Flair, Scoreboard Fundraising, Show Dots, Tide Dry Cleaners, and Yamaha. Thank you for supporting AZMBA. We welcome Ryan Springler to the podcast. Ryan, it is so great to see you. I'm guessing you're really busy this time of year. What have you been up to?
Well, I'm right in the middle of winter drumline and winter guard season, so I'm bouncing back and forth around all my programs, making sure that everything is kind of turning out the right way, helping to finish produce things, and just steer the ship as best you can. There's like 3 to 4 weeks left, I think, for everyone until they get to their last shows. So we're all kind of on final approach, and that's the mode that I'm in right now.
It was fun to be in California and text you, and you weren't even at home. You were in Minnesota judging or something like that. That we were both texting each other, but way far away from our homes.
Yeah, it's you when you grow up in the activity, you see all of, your role models kind of bouncing around the country and doing their thing and really lending our little band world this air of glamour. And it's cool how, just sticking in it and having great friends that sort of ends up becoming you sooner than you thought. Because all of a sudden you've got your network of wonderful people that you've collaborated with, that you're friends with, that are just all over the country. It's genuinely one of the coolest things about band and music education.
Well, Ryan, you're definitely well known to a lot of our listeners and a lot of people around Arizona. For someone that may not know you very well, can you maybe give us a quick story about your journey or through music or through the performing arts?
Yeah, so right now I work full time as a designer, consultant, educator, program coordinator for pageantry groups. But that started really for me right before middle school, because in I grew up in rural New Mexico, and the big fork in the road was in sixth grade you either did band or you either did PE, and they were and never the twain shall meet, and so I chose band. And I started learning how to play trumpet. There was a gentleman who went to the same church that my family did. He was a barber in a little town near where I was, even smaller than where I grew up, only like 3 or 4 thousand people. And I learned how to sight read music in the back of his barbershop. And his wife had a tamale stand next door, and my brother and I would go and eat tamales there, and we paid via goat milk. Like, that's real New Mexico rural barter economy for you. But it's like, learn how to play the trumpet, and then unfortunately, no one's been rid of me since. My family moved to Arizona. I went to high school at Dobson. Then went to college for several years at ASU, and I studied philosophy and music composition. And I had this impression that I was going to end up in academia. I thought I was going to be a philosophy professor for the longest time. But during the early 2000s and then through the 2010s, it just really became clear that there was a lot of fun to be had and a lot of money to be had in the pageantry world. And everything started falling together, and it hasn't stopped falling together since. So I've just really enjoyed my career through it. Now I bounce around all around the country working for marching bands, drum corps, color guards, just making sure that everyone's having the best and most vibrant and creative season possible.
I learned so much. I've known you for 10 years. I had no idea that you learned how to play the trumpet in exchange for goat milk. That's pretty fierce.
I'm pretty sure that there are fewer than five drill writers who could say the same thing. Drill writers, program coordinators, can't be that many.
So, Ryan, I'm very curious. You're talking so much about the creativity of it all. So it sounds like you're predominantly a designer. How is it? Do you only do design? Are you like an administrator? Is it some combination of the two? Like, what does your job feel like? Maybe we can just start with what you're doing in this moment and this part of the season.
Yeah, on a design team, everyone ideally has a pretty well-defined role and a well-defined set of like products and goals that they're trying to achieve. The color guard caption head is responsible for educating the color guard. The sound designer is responsible for coming up with the electronic patches and the synth patches that you're going to be using through the season. But the program coordinator, show coordinator, artistic director. There's a lot of words for this bubble, this sort of like missing administrative coordinative role, and it has a slightly different guise depending on the needs and the scale of each program. But what I've generally found is it's like you have a band director who is someone who is always, a high agency individual who's very, very organized, very passionate about the success of their program, but they only have two hands and 24 hours in the day, and there's a certain like limited amount of surface area that even the world's most incredibly dedicated and obsessed band director can access with the program. And so when you're dealing with putting together a marching band show, which often requires writing custom arrangements, getting a custom drill design, costumes and props and travel and all of that. There's a lot of getting everyone on the same page, unifying everyone with the same creative vision, ensuring that people are fulfilling their roles logistically at the right times and in the right order and communicating with each other. There's a lot of sort of these administrative leadership sort of things that it's not that they're beyond the scope of the average band director at all, but it's just that there's always more than enough for one person to do. And so I found that a lot of programs past a certain level of complexity tend to bring in a program coordinator or artistic director to sort of unify all of this stuff and create a job title where the buck stops, where we're not just dealing with someone who's necessarily like, hey, here's the show idea. We're going to do a show about balloons. And, the opener is going to be green balloons. Then we're going to do red balloons in the ballad. You thought it was
Mm.
going to be blue, but it's red. It's going to be a aggressive ballad. It's not just that. It's this layer of being able to be someone who's chasing these people down via emails, ensuring that conversations are happening, and not just logistically, but they're sort of carrying the excitement, the whatever creative spark got everyone on the same page at the first part of the design process. um Making sure that we haven't lost that spark, that the things we said we wanted to do in the production or in the course of a given season, that we're actually achieving those things. So on some level, it's a role that's able to help administrate and keep track of these things and help coordinate them, but it's also, I kind of hate to use the word because it's a little wishy-washy, but like a visionary role where there's this design impetus that we had, and we're trying to keep that flame lit and not just lose it in the middle of being like, oh well, the percussion's a little bit too loud here. You know, it's a role that is able to be a little bit far enough away from both the educational and the design specifics that you can sit back and be like, well, why is the percussion playing at all here? Or why is there even music happening here at all? Is the problem that the moment is too long? Like,
Mhm.
it's there's an element to the role where you're someone who's got the same level of irons in the fire as a band director, but you're also in a position where you're not in the day to day. You're not in the process of interacting with a slew of parent emails and meetings with the administrator, where you're able to sort of interface with the big picture and talk about how a lot of these things work together in a goal directed sort of way. But and I say this, saying God bless every public educator that I work with. There's a lot of red tape that's involved in the day-to-day process, and it can make it hard to sort of, when you're in the middle of the forest, it can be really hard to see what the actual shape of the landscape is like. So there's an element to the program coordinator role that allows you to bring in someone who cares a lot about the program, knows a lot about the program, but also has a degree of remove, like a family doctor almost, where it's like, I know what your situation is, I know what your health goals are, but I'm not sitting there watching you take every step on your daily walk around the park.
You hold a lot of roles actually just in every program. I've been taking a little bit of notes here as you've been talking. Something that I felt you really brought to CG over the years, because you've worked with us. How many years did you work with Casa Grande? Have you ever counted?
It's
Started in '06.
So we're at 20 years. My 20th year involved with the program in some capacity.
So I
Wow.
worked with you for 20 years, and you came in as I'm going to help these guys march, right? And it's just grown from there. And through your journey, I think something that you've really helped our program and me is to help define those roles to help have a successful program to where everybody's doing the same thing. And the cool thing is, I feel like after you've kind of done that, then it's kind of locked in and set. You said the word visionary and how that might be kind of like cheesy per se. Not at all. Like I think that's the thing that I value most within our program that you bring. I want to talk a little bit about your creativity and how you get these visions about things because it's so encompassing. It's a lot with visually what can we do and things like that, but you are a bit of a music encyclopedia. Hopefully everybody's listened to a few podcasts earlier when we had a discussion with Jeff Marchant, and he mentioned that he'll be talking about a design idea. Usually you'll come up with some kind of a song that he's never heard of, and it was perfect for the show. So that's definitely something that I always look forward to in our discussions. But when we talk about your creativity, is there something that you feel like that stems from, or is that just something that's always been a part of you, or how did that come about?
I've always been an omnivore. Ever since I was a really little kid, I learned to read at an early age, and my parents couldn't keep me out of the library. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I grew up in a small town in New Mexico, and there was not a lot to do besides read books. And so, diving into history and art and culture and reading great novels, and, a lot of input leads to a lot of output. And one of the things that helps there is it's like, a lot of this stuff I learned really early on. A lot of like classical music, for example. My grandma was a big classical music fan. And so it started getting in my blood at an early age. And as you start memorizing all of these pieces in this great Western orchestral tradition, you start drawing connections where it's like, oh, that harmony moves in a way that sounds familiar to this pop song. And I wonder if we could crossbreed them and arrange them. Or, oh, I remember when that piece of music was used in this movie and there was this love scene that was happening. So if we're going to try and create a love scene in the middle of this abstract marching band story we're telling, why not take a page from Alfred Hitchcock's book and put the music and the visual and the conceptual together? So a lot of it is just having as big of a library as you can and being open to letting the things crossbreed between them, not, just sort of letting the smell of every ingredient that's in the kitchen always be close at hand, close to your nostrils, so that you can make those connections where it's like, oh, I don't have soy sauce, but actually this ingredient would work. And it's being able to sometimes swap out one or two ingredients in a familiar recipe that gives things a totally unique kind of twist. So much great fusion cuisine is, hey, let's take this piece of food from this one corner of the world and then let's tweak one thing about it in a way that, we would do in South America. And then all of a sudden you have something that comes across as really, really different, even though you're still operating within the framework of, it's basically spaghetti, but you've done one or two things to it so that it feels like something different.
This is so interesting. I wear, like you, Ryan, I wear a number of hats in pageantry. The one that I'm trying on more frequently these days is the adjudicator role in indoor
Mm-hmm.
percussion and in marching band. And so, in some ways, when I'm watching shows and evaluating them, I'm noticing like the range of what they're exploring and like how multidimensional is it, how full and robust is the story. But I'm almost looking at it through the lens of like, what are they doing? Like, what skills are they demonstrating that can be credited and are more different than one another? And you're speaking almost completely just from a place of pure creativity and just almost like science, like experiment, seeing what's going to happen. I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about what motivates you to make a show, or like, what is the show just an expression of creating, like making a painting like an artist would, or is it like you are trying to legislate certain skills to be, valued for scores, or all of the above? What say you?
All of the above. And I feel like my perspective on this has really changed over time. Early on in the process, and Martin, you can well remember this because you had to suffer through some of these brilliant ideas. But I used to feel like the most important thing that I was doing as a designer, and particularly as I sort of moved up the totem pole and became more responsible for more significant parts of the design earlier in the process, I started out thinking that, I'm an idea guy, so the most important thing I can contribute is a cool idea and cool music that people have never heard before, and this interesting twist on that where I was thinking the most important thing that I'm doing is the product that we design and then give to the kids, and then another process that's separate from that begins afterwards. But the truth is, when I look at things now, especially post pandemic, which gave us a really interesting sort of sea change moment to get away from pageantry and away from large ensemble rehearsals for a while and get a little bit more philosophical. I feel like I have a role that's much more like a gardener or a zookeeper, where there's this organic thing that it's like some art is like sculpture, where nothing, when you're sculpting something out of marble, nothing happens by accident. You have a block of marble and then you chop away everything that doesn't look like an elephant, then you have a little marble sculpture of an elephant afterwards, and it's facing the way that you intended it to, and its trunk is curving just so exactly the way that you carved it. But that's not the way that band is, because we have all these great ideas and then 6 months later we give them to a bunch of teenagers, and then they have to sort of translate it and then we show it to an audience of strangers, and the audience, there's all these separate layers where we don't have direct control over what's happening. It's mediated through
Mhm.
first teaching other people to perform this vision, and then having a degree of separation even further away from that. Strangers react to it. And so it's not like sculpting at all, it's like gardening, where it's like you can plant seeds and you can plant them in the right area, and you can try and like water things and fertilize them as best as possible. But I can't control whether or not 20 or 21 rose blossoms are going to bloom on this rose bush. I can't control how tall it's going to be by March of next year. I can try to make it as tall as possible. I can try to keep predators away, and I can try and groom this thing so that the largest number of rose blooms appear on this thing. But there's a certain level of control that we lack when we're dealing with these artistic processes that are large groups of other people, that you're either first teaching what to do or expecting them to react a certain way about things. There's and because things are mediated like that, I find that my role is often trying to create an environment over time, over several seasons, as a matter of fact, where we're trying to make more of one thing happen and less of another thing happen. Like, this has all been very hypothetical and very metaphorical language right now. But like a good example would be, in 2010, I used to think I want the band to look really good visually. So it's important that the drill is very cool and the body is really cool. And usually to a 20 something, that means making it more complicated and more difficult. But nowadays, if I knew that we wanted to make the band look better visually, I would understand that as, a 3 to 5 year process of making sure that the personnel are in the right place. Who is the caption head and who is their staff? Is there such a thing? If there's not, who is the member of the director team that's responsible for these things? How do we introduce skill sets during band camp? And then which do we focus on? What is the criteria for something being clean enough to be introduced so that we can touch a first layer of it and then let it be for a couple of weeks, versus what's a thing that needs to be repped every single day, like some of our health and wellness things like physical training and stretching. These are things that are obligatory on a daily basis, but say teaching kids how to jazz run better is not something that it would be wise to spend a large amount of every day doing. So there's this process of grooming and gardening and helping everyone sort of understand that it's like, oh, if we want the visual caption to do better over time, it's not just a matter of, bringing in the world's best drill writer and having them write some really cool stuff. As a program coordinator, it's like it would be sort of naive for me to assume, oh, creating a cool event for Casa Grande would mean going into the spreadsheet and typing drill writer, make sure to be exciting at the end of the opener. But there's this multiple year process of making sure that it's like, the section leaders know that when we're cleaning drill, because a cool show is going to have more drill and the drill to be cool is going to have to be cleaner, the section leaders are going to have to deal with longer, more tedious rehearsals that involve cleaning at a more minuscule level. So even the way that the leadership team of the teenagers reacts to some of these environments that we put them in has to kind of be in the purview of the program coordinator. I need to be aware of the fact that you just can't ask for neat things to happen carte blanche on a given year, but that everything represents this developmental process of getting the right teachers in the room, understanding that we have a logical flow of how our curriculum evolves over time, and that we're presenting the membership. I want to say the kids, but I should say the membership, because this is really generalized to any ensemble, making sure that they have something that as we rotate through over 3 to 5 years, we're gradually increasing the overall average level of the program at this thing. And that is what I found generates lasting change, I would say. Not just trying to make a cool show on day one, but worrying about these larger organic sort of things that we have to groom like a bonsai tree almost.
Yeah. God, there's so many great things you just said, and I wish we could dig into all of them or I could remember. Well, yes. One thing, so we've been speaking very metaphorically and big picture, and I think that is super important because I think sometimes when it comes to why a show design maybe doesn't work or land the way that people think it will, is because they lack, or they're not necessarily approaching it from this place of like, I feel like you're so inspired right now, and you talked about being a visionary and having the leading the flame, if you will. I wonder if we can get just a bit more specific on this one thing you mentioned, this idea of like, almost feels like a skeleton that you then go back and you like edit, embellish, produce, as if it's not just like, yeah, I'm going to teach a hard choreography on day one because that's what they're going to do in the beginning of the show. But it sounds like there's a lot more like scaffolded layer of a process. I'd be curious if you could dig into that a little bit more, and maybe we can cite like if you have any examples you can think of that might be relevant, like what did you do for the first season with the group, and maybe what does that process look like in a full fifth season, let's say.
That's a great question. The first thing that I'm concerned about when I begin interacting with a new program is developing a context for them. Who are they right now? Where have they been? And where are they going? And oftentimes I really like having the ball in their court as much as possible so that I can learn from the other members of the design team and the members of the staff and the directors. What are the things that they like about themselves? What are the things that they feel are areas of growth or even weaknesses that we might want to try and hide or not expose as much? What are strengths of the program that we want to selectively expose, rely on, generate effect and excitement with? And then in a larger, more nonlinear way, I want to kind of get an idea for what the team's personality is like. One of the things that you almost realize as a program coordinator is that you have to be a host of a party. It's like you're hosting a dinner party. And so you have to kind of think about the right cast of characters and what food are we eating and what's the venue going to be like. You have to kind of there's this bedside manner you develop to learn how to talk to the team the best way and how to get the best results out of people. There are some teams where everyone needs to be in the room and it's happening over dinner and it's very loud and anarchic and very casual. And then there are other teams where the process begins as something that feels very airtight, like just me and the head director back channeling in a text message thread. And it's like, all right, we've got something very, very specific. Now let's start feeding people in one by one so that we can grow this in a very detailed sort of way. But in any case, I'm just trying to figure out what the shape of the human landscape is at the program, because what I'm trying to optimize is I'm trying to garden this human landscape and get the ingredients to work together, and also try and do a little bit of, for lack of a better word, threat detection, where when we talk about what are the goals for the program and what are things we want to do with this next fall, are there red flags that I can detect early on, or are there elephants in the room that we're very selectively not speaking about? Like, can I figure out what's the missing data, what's the missing testimony that helps get a program to where they want to be? Because every program wants to win a state championship, but only one program does every year. And on some level, we have to kind of interact with the thought where it's like, well, we're all trying to do really well. So what are the things that make us fall short? Some of them are under our control and some of them aren't. So what I'm trying to do the first year is just absorb as much of that as I possibly can to understand how that might better let us choose to not have a percussion break this year, or maybe the color guard is all going to span unison equipment, or maybe the color guard is going to be featured in front and we're not going to do nearly as much drill because we need to sound better. It's like those are the sort of things early on, the big things a program needs to succeed. I want to try and figure out those things as soon as possible so that we can then start planning for how those things are groomed and orchestrated over time.
I could imagine that year 3, 4 with the group is quite a bit better for you. You get into your own groove because as you're talking, and I think about our experiences together, the word trust comes up, that there's a lot of trust between like the director and the program coordinator. And it makes me think about just our journey together. There are several key things that I remember were out of my comfort zone, and you were just like, this is going to be good for us, this is going to be good for us. And there was a lot of trust before anybody was doing it. You said we're going to have different uniforms this year. Like nobody was doing that in 2012, and all of a sudden you said that's going to be something that we're going to do. I remember the first time you wanted to do a beautiful Blue Devil blue plume. I was like, no, we can't do that. You're like, no, trust me, this is going to be good. I'm like, no, it has to be black. Putting that trust in you. Like there's so many things I can list off that just that trust that I had in you has steered us in the right direction. Do you kind of find that the several years with the group, it kind of gets easier and just things flow a little bit better?
Totally. And I first of all, thank you. And I have to just double underline what you were saying about the role of trust. It's probably the most important currency that you can deal in as a program coordinator. And so, I was alluding to wanting to just come in and kind of be a vacuum and absorb all of this context when I first get to a program. And it's so I can start making deposits in the trust bank as soon as possible. Because for a lot of directors, one thing that I think there's so many different ways to be a successful band director, but they all have many things in common. And some of those things include being very detail oriented and very passionate about core ways the program is organized through time and with money. And so to try and capriciously change these things and, dare I say, optimize them, like to come in as a stranger and suggest to someone who's the credentialed educator that it's like, hey, I'm going to make your program better. I feel like you have to really, really demonstrate that you're not, just you want to play with the toys so you can break them, but that you actually have an appreciation for the specific terrain that you've been planted in. So I feel like a lot of that trust comes from seeing that it's like, this is not just a person who's treating this as an Excel spreadsheet or a Google sheet to fill in. This is someone who understands the program as a specific collection of people that have specific likes and dislikes, that have a specific favorite drum corps show. And so it would be cool if we programmed that one piece of music and did it in a slightly different way. So we could both check that box for them and also achieve something special for ourselves. It's like the more you know each other, the more we're able to really riff off of each other and improvise together. It's like we learn everyone's chord changes, so we're able to riff together so much more easily. I think so much of our process of growing together was learning not just the things that we like, but then the things that we're really good at. There's a very specific kind of music that it can be of multiple genres, but it's like I'll hear it and I'll think, oh, this is something that Martin could really arrange beautifully for Casa Grande. I can hear the Casa Grande winds playing this already, and I can see, with our specific set of strengths from woodwind to brass to front ensemble to battery, how you would guide it musically into being something that would be successful for the program. And I couldn't make any of those choices if I didn't care about what you liked, what you did well, and the specific, all of those, those contextual things about each caption's strengths and weaknesses. So I almost wish that, when everyone would bring me in, they'd bring me in for like a 5-year contract or something, so I could like force everyone to start talking and meeting after and hanging out together so that we can learn each other better. Often the problem with a lot of programs that have frustrations in the process is that no one reads the email. No one responds to the text message. No one reads the schedule. No one knows the drum major name. So they have to ask the headband director to tell that drum major that they're rushing. It's like you could have the world's best percussion person, but if they don't have those points of human connection and points of human interest, their information will not be relevant to the teenagers. So there's a huge amount of buy-in and trust and vulnerability that I think you have to display as a lead designer to be able to effectively marshal the troops at all levels. Because that's really what it is. It's total war in trying to create something from nothing. And if you're not able to address the students by name, if you're not able to address your fellow staff members and the caption heads by name, there's a certain level of buy-in that they're just not going to have with Mr. Airplane, who flies in for a weekend and adds a 4 starch to the ballad.
The 4 starts, yes. Well, and another thing that kind of came to my head as you were talking there is you are completely invested in all of your programs. And it's great for me to hear you get excited about shows that you're working with that may not even be my show, but you're like, and I'm doing this really cool thing here, and you are truly invested, and I think that's why you have the success that you do. Is it tough sometimes as you're working, and there's some probably programs you work with, whether it be drum and bugle corps or a marching band, or even the winter season, where there's large staffs, and then there becomes some disagreements between some of the designers or some of the key people on the team. Is there a trick or a magic solution you have to help kind of navigate those waters?
I actually wouldn't know. I've never experienced a disagreement in pageantry. So the honest answer is it happens all the time, because we're flawed, incomplete humans, and we'll never really know 100% of what other people are thinking. So there's always miscommunication. There's always factions that arise. And some of it is that it's constrained by scarcity, where we don't have an infinite amount of time to try all these different options. If you choose one color of flag, it means all the other colors are not what we're doing. If you choose one thing to focus on in rehearsal, it means all the other things are not being focused on. So that choice we have to make with scarce time and resources really can divide up a team. And I think the thing that's the most effective for conflict resolution and to get the best result is to try and elevate things from the level of the personal to the level of the systemic or creative. I'm taking a page out of your book, Martin, because this is something I can hear you saying. It's not about me being right, it's about the show being right. And I feel like in as much as, I can be brought in as a lead designer or a mediator, I try and help everyone to see that it's not team music versus team visual, it's team humans versus team the show. There's a problem that we're all trying to solve, and that this isn't about validating the color guard caption head versus the percussion caption head. This is about validating the effort of the teenagers, the entire staff as a whole, the program. And so trying to get people to see it on that level, like that individually I think I used the analogy of total war earlier. It's like similarly, it's realizing, it's making sure that everyone in their own caption and within their own ministry realizes that it's like you can lose individual battles. The important thing is that the grand sweep of the war is successful, of getting the show across the finish line, of it being as vibrant and unique and exciting and achievable and legible to the audience as possible. That it would be ridiculous if we let adult temperament be a hurdle to that.
I think what's really cool about everything you just said, Ryan, is that it really ties back to what you were saying before about it really is imperative that you know the people that you're working with. Elements that we often overlook, like knowing the students' names, knowing the staff members' names. I remember when I was teaching one program and a color guard caption head came in, like the first thing I did was talk to them. But then I also made sure that she was introduced to all the other caption heads because she was the only new one. And it was really important to me that, yeah, you're probably not going to interact with the percussion all that much, but like you should know who the battery caption head is. You should know his name. And if you don't have that base level of respect, then you can't talk about the conflict that arises when it's fall season, you're being adjudicated, and the general effect judge talks about how, the battery moment is being distracted by the guard feature. We have to talk about what is the focus of the show at this moment, and allowing ourselves to take a step back with our egos and allow what's best for the show, even if that means maybe your caption is scaled down a little bit. In some ways, it almost sounds like you're trying to make sure that you're not winning, but like you're trying to make sure everyone else is winning. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, and it's so interesting. There have been a couple places that I've worked where there was a little bit of a sense of, oh well, the directors just always listen to Ryan. Ryan always gets his way, or oh well, we'll just wait for Ryan to come in and tell us what to do. And it's tricky. It's not that the program coordinator is a role that has absolute power, and nor should it be, but it's more that the program coordinator has a responsibility to only give instructions that should be followed. It's like, it's not that you have the ability to give an instruction that you can just tell people to do whatever, but you actually have the responsibility to only tell people things that they will find reasonable, because there's a certain amount of the role where as a leader, your job is to demonstrate credibility, so I think if you're always able to take things back from the personal level, the interpersonal conflict of who gets to choose what we spend time on in rehearsal or who gets to choose what's important, trying to find a way to bring it back up to the meta level, the object level of, well, what's happening in the show and what did we say we want to do there and what would best achieve that? Like that it's a role that's about trying to get everyone to logistically elevate to that place and be able to look outside their caption.
Well, and it's a very difficult position when you think about it. Like your job is, it's a lot of hats, and there's a lot that you do for the program. Thinking about maybe some younger people or people that are looking to try to explore that role, do you have any advice to anybody that may be thinking, you know what, this is a position I'd like to play with some point?
I would say two things. Number one, watch out. No, just kidding. Everyone should do it. The two things I would say, one, going back to the very beginning of the conversation, it's develop a library of influences and things that you're passionate about, and ideally they're things that are not just pageantry, because if all we do is watch, chew other people's casseroles and then spit them back out, then it's like you get this even mushier, even more shapeless thing. Band is already marching band, at least as we do it, is already sort of a derivative art form where we're using other people's costumes and other people's music and stuff like that. So I think as much as we can keep from just sort of like regurgitating other band ideas, that we're bringing things in from outside pageantry, music that we haven't heard before, fashion ideas that we haven't seen before, conceptual ideas that we haven't played with, that's what will give you as a young designer some point of view that other people don't have. If all you're doing is just watching the other successful drum corps shows, color guard shows, marching band shows, ultimately what you do is just sort of going to be a copy of a copy of a copy. So I would say to a young designer, the most important thing is to stay curious and to have just the largest possible internal library of references, because that makes it all the more likely that you're going to combine them in a unique way. And then the second thing I would say, and I'm speaking strictly to myself as a young 20 something, don't travel up the ladder too quickly, because to be effective as a program coordinator, and I'm still learning this lesson, you have to give up things that you might have really, really liked about doing on lower tiers of the totem pole. And I find, I mean, having this conversation with a lot of teachers that I work with, a lot of the caption heads, a lot of the directors, that it's like when you become the battery caption head, you have to kind of kill your image of yourself as the snare tech. Because if all you're concerned about is standing in front of like the 3 or 4 best players in the drum line and talking to them about the coolest things that no one but the one percussion caption head is going to really, really address on the tape, there's points you're leaving on the ground. There's unpicked fruit, so to speak. You have to broaden your perspective to not just the entire percussion program, but how that fits into what the woodwinds are doing, how that fits into the balance of the sound design, all of those things. So as you zoom out, you have to give up a lot of things that may have initially given you a lot of fulfillment and excitement about doing pageantry. It's very hard to program coordinate when you're down on the ground cleaning feet. So I have to sort of stop being a visual technician and stop viewing the drill as like all of these little ticks to clean, because that's not what people want me to do. That's not my role or responsibility in me anymore. My role is to come in and be like, the drill's too hard. That's the problem. Next year we need to do simpler drill. It's like ideally those sort of insight things where we make longer term adjustments that really save hours and hours of rehearsal time over the course of several years. It's going to be harder to do that if you're focused on these little minutia that you may have enjoyed when you were just a caption head or just a tech. So to young folks, as you jump up the ladder and as you think about becoming a program coordinator, just be aware that it's like you do ultimately have to delegate some of those things. You do have to give up some of those things, and there's a certain amount of, again, just mediation. It's you don't get direct contact with the surface anymore. There's people, layers of people in between you and more distance. And it's a sad thing because you don't get to be as hands-on, but it's a great thing because the distance allows you the perspective to again see what the actual landscape of what's happening is.
A lot of Arizonans don't have the resources and maybe or the money to have a program coordinator, or it is a band director that it's effectively the program coordinator. And so to that end, I feel like a lot of directors program music that they like without an idea of what it looks like. And I think it could be useful to talk about like how do you navigate a situation where it's like this music won't resonate visually on the field, or like how do we coordinate an event out of this? I feel like you could have special insight on that.
Gosh, that's tricky. I mean, I wish I had a reliable way to determine those things, because then I would be maybe a little more competitively successful. So the thing that I would say there is, gosh, it's so tricky. I think the key is to kind of approach it as objectively as you can, asking the questions, is the music that we're picking, or is the concept that we're doing, is it relevant to our audience? And that audience has multiple tiers: the judges, the football crowd, and then the people that are going to see it the most, which are going to be the families of the band program and the members themselves. Like, does what we're doing speak to as many levels of the audience as possible? Are we getting as much demographic saturation with this choice as we possibly could? And if we're not getting it with this choice, that's okay, as long as we specifically do something with this one. It's like, maybe you don't like sushi, but that's not all I'm serving. I'm also going to deliver spaghetti and meatballs and a cold cut sandwich. And God, I have no idea why I'm coming up with those food items off the top of my mouth. Anyways, but ideally you're looking at it where it's like there's something for everyone. In as much as you can sort of bulletproof a design, you want it to be able to speak to as much of the audience as possible. And then when you're looking at the concept, whatever sort of conceptual gloss that you're putting on the music that you want to do, worthwhile question to ask would be, is this something that can be visually and musically explained by teenagers from 800 feet away? Is this something that is going to make sense within the terms of the art form that we're doing, which is formation shifting around on the field and changing staging and choreography that implies environmental music demands and a certain limited timbral and harmonic range that you get with contemporary marching band conditions. Can your big idea fit inside those conventions? Can your big idea make sense if you spin a rifle about it, as opposed to just needing to stop and have a big vocal sample explain what you're thinking? Are there aspects of the idea that you're trying to get across that we can get from just the music and the visual themselves? Like, can the design explain itself on some level? I think the Blue Coats have been really successful with that. When you think about the Tilt year, we call the show Tilt, and then there are enough visual cues and musical cues, and that not just give you a surface level of, oh, I see how that's slanted, tilted, askew, but then it lets you sit back, and it's so obvious, it lets you sit back and say, oh, but there's this larger sense of quirkiness to everything. It's all kind of got this individual slant on it, and appreciate the design on multiple levels. So being able to step back and ask yourself the question honestly, is my big idea going to resonate like this for as much of the audience as possible and on as many levels as possible? That's the best thing you can do. And then at that point, we're all just sort of victims of our individual taste level and experience level, and for lack of a better word, just empathy. Is my guess about what you will feel when you watch this an accurate guess, or is it inaccurate? And that's one of the reasons why maybe you get that sense of a science experiment happening with the way that I've described some of these show design processes, because ultimately, all the events that we're creating are on some level a hypothesis. I believe that these kids, with this level of production value that we're able to achieve on this year, will make most audiences react well. And then you put it out there, and then you test the hypothesis, and then you edit the initial conditions until you either fulfill the goal or you unfortunately learn that no, it's just not going to work.
You've worked on a lot of shows, a lot of shows. Do you have any favorites?
Honestly, I really enjoy all of the things that I work on. One of my weaknesses as a designer is if I don't like where I work, I gradually see myself out. And so I've really found that I'm in places that I love, working with people that I love, for students that are incredible to teach. And so on one level, there's this element where I want to be like, I love all of my children equally. But specifically thinking about in Arizona, there are two shows that come to mind, and one of them would be one that we did together at Casa Grande, all three of us, and it would be the Crash Test Dummies show, because it was not, I mean, it was great that it won, but that's not honestly the thing that I'm going to remember. The thing that I'm going to remember is just that it was fun, and it was light, and it was easy, and it felt like it designed itself. It's like all the fun of spinning a pottery wheel without even having to kick the thing to keep it moving. It just shaped itself, and like the idea resonated with the kids, and they were charming, and the audience loved it, and it felt like a golden season. And the other show that I want to shout out is a similarly golden season, and that was in 2019, the Rhapsody in Blue show that I got to do with Mountain Ridge High School. And that one was really special on a number of levels. Number one, because it was a few years into, that was when Aaron Vogel was the director there, wonderful music educator. That was the first year that it felt like we had really made the program his, that he's, so thoughtful and so detail oriented. And that was the year that it felt like his vision for the program really caught fire with the kids. And from the get-go, the parents were amazing, band camp was wonderful. These seasons have this golden show aspect to them, not just because they won or did well or were fun to watch, but because there are these concentric layers of enjoyment that we get to have, where the rehearsals were fun. Even the day that we got rained out was fun for reason X or reason Y, where you can sense that there's a real, there are layers to the kind of fulfillment that people are getting when they work on them.
That's fantastic. Do you have any shout outs that you would like to give? We like to give our guests an opportunity to shout out some names of people that may be influential to them or they may appreciate.
Well, it would be impossible not to shout out you, Martin, because you gave me one of the most important things that I've gotten, and it's a chance as a designer. Like the first big program that really trusted me was Casa Grande, and the first place that I got to really take risks that I now make my bread and butter on elsewhere was Casa Grande, and it wouldn't have been possible not just without the kind of kid that we have there and the kind of parent that raises that kind of kid, but the kind of teacher and mentor that sees their potential and my potential. It is, just unreplicatable, the kind of experience that we all got to have there. And I feel unfairly lucky because the kids that go to CG only get 4 years to learn with you, but I got 20. So that's been really cool for me. And then just one other shout out. This one would actually go to the there's a large number of designers out there, and I could just gloss over a couple of them that are nationally renowned: Richard Henshaw, Lindsay Vinto, Jody Rhodes, Jamie Hawley, Michael Rayford, lots of people who took way more time than they needed to and way more effort and care than they needed to either open a door for me, take a chance on me, create an opportunity for me, or explain a little bit about their own thought process. It's one of the things that makes it so important for me to want to mentor young designers, want to develop young staff members, want to make programs better, because I feel like so much of my own success, in as much as you can call it that, was granted to me as a grace, a gift from people that had already figured it out, and that just changed my life. And so it feels very important to continue doing the same thing.
Ryan, we really appreciate you spending your time with us. We love the conversations.
Absolutely. I love you guys. I love working with you, and I love Arizona Marching Band. One of the things I'm proudest of in my life is that we created the AZMBA circuit, that it was so popular, that it was such an exciting and positive experience, and it's always rewarding to create something that has a sense of legacy or something that lasts. And it's really exciting to see that so many people have been able to do the kind of shows that they want to do, have been able to explore a more colorful and a vibrant sort of world, and to do things on their own terms, and that we've created a little bit of a venue for that individuality and that creativity to happen. So really, really just love everything about what we've done in Arizona.
Thanks, Ryan.
Bye.